It buzzed in quietly, no chime, no dramatic fanfare, just a silent pulse on my phone screen while I was mid-keystroke, putting together an invoice breakdown for a government contract. I just nailed a 3-month integration roadmap, and I was tweaking the payment schedule when the notification lit up. At first, I ignored it. My fingers hovered over the mouse, more concerned with tax codes and line items than another message from the family group chat. But something about the silence after the buzz made me glance. It was a message from Tessa. 4 words. You're not invited. Clara doesn't want you there. That was it. No punctuation. No elaboration. No explanation. Not even a softening follow-up like, we'll talk when I get home, or, I'm sorry it had to be this way. Just a text that read like a corporate decision made in a boardroom I wasn't allowed in. Cold. Dismissive. Final. I didn't answer right away. My screen stayed bright as I reread the message, my eyes tracing each word like they might change if I blinked long enough. I swallowed. My mouth was dry, but I hadn't realized until then that my jaw had gone tight. I looked around my office, the framed photo of Tessa and me on our honeymoon, the fake plant she insisted would brighten the room, the world's okayest coder mug she got me as a joke. All of it, suddenly, felt like set dressing from someone else's life. A sitcom where I thought I was part of the cast. Turns out I was just funding the pilot. The wedding. Clara's wedding. The one I'd spent months organizing finances for. $84,300. I knew the figure by heart. Not because I was keeping score, but because every time they asked for just one more thing, I opened my spreadsheets and made it work. I cut corners. I held off on a new server for my side project. I even skipped a planned trip to the Caymans that Tessa and I were supposed to take. There's always next year, she'd said. I exhaled through my nose, the way you do when you're trying not to let fury shake your hands. I clicked over to my file manager. The folder sat there like a scar. Clara plus Damon wedding. All assets. Inside were subfolders, contracts, receipts, creative assets, payment confirmations. I tracked every detail for them like I would a client. Better, actually. I didn't even charge for scope creep. My cursor hovered over the folder. My finger hesitated on the mouse, just long enough for memory to flash. Clara crying in our kitchen about the floral vendor who ghosted her. Me making 24 calls. Me finding a replacement. Me driving across town on my lunch break to drop off a deposit check because Damon forgot. Me fixing it. Again and again. But I wasn't family, right? Just a convenient ATM with a data plan. I right-clicked. The options popped up, and in the cold glow of my dual monitors, I whispered, just loud enough for the walls to hear, then pay for it yourselves, leeches. Click. Delete. The progress bar slid across the screen like a guillotine. The files vanished. All of it, gone. I leaned back in my chair, arms folded. Not triumphant. Not relieved. Just still. Hollow, almost. But behind that emptiness, I felt something stir. Something sharp and clean. Not revenge. Not bitterness. Clarity. I rolled my shoulders back and stared at the empty folder space. Blank. Silent. Just like the invitation that never came. I picked up my phone again and scrolled through old messages. Tessa once texted me a photo of Clara in her dress. She looks like a movie star, doesn't she? I'd responded with, she'll be stunning. Damon's a lucky guy. I was genuine. I always tried to be. Even when Clara treated me like a background prop in her fantasy wedding. Even when Tessa started talking more to her family's group chat than to me. Even when I noticed that I had gone from partner to placeholder. My stomach turned, but not with regret. More like revelation. I stood up and walked into the living room. Our couch, the one I stayed up assembling the night before her parents came to visit, still had the decorative pillows Tessa insisted on, all lined in gold trim. Her aesthetic, not mine. I never cared for appearances. I cared about foundation. The unglamorous bones of things. The work behind the scenes. The kind of man who made sure the lights stayed on while others posed in front of chandeliers. And yet, here I was. Cut out like a stock photo nobody paid the licensing fee for. I didn't respond to Tessa's message. Not then. Not immediately. Instead, I walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water, letting the silence stretch. I didn't pace. I didn't shout. I sat at the dining table we picked out together and finally allowed myself to feel something close to closure. If this was how they wanted to play it, exile, exclusion, erasure, then I would oblige. But not quietly. They could have their wedding. They just wouldn't have my support. I pulled out my laptop again. My fingers danced over the keys like they were playing piano in a minor key. I drafted one email to the venue coordinator. Subject line, regarding the Clara and Damon wedding account. Then another to the DJ. Then the floral designer. Then the luxury bus service scheduled for guest transport. One by one. Calm. Precise. Professional. But before I sent anything, I took one last look at my phone. Still no follow-up message. No apology. No attempt at repair. So I sent the first email. And the bridge? It burned clean. When I married Tessa, I didn't just take her hand. I took on her whole world. At the time, I told myself I was lucky. I mean, she was bright, magnetic, beautiful in that effortless way people always described in passing, but never quite captured in pictures. Her laugh turned heads in a room, and I was the quiet guy in the corner who somehow got chosen. But I didn't marry just her. I married into the Hartwell family, a walking, talking reality show wrapped in designer labels, brunch reservations, and passive-aggressive text chains. They were the kind of people who cried over lobster being slightly overcooked, but called therapy for people who don't know how to bounce back. And I, a systems analyst with a humble upbringing and a deep respect for logic, told myself I could fit into the chaos if I just stayed useful. Clara was the golden child. Always had been. Even Tessa admitted it in quieter moments, when the wine had taken the edge off her polish. She's the star, she once told me while we folded laundry. It's always been that way. And it was. Clara wasn't just adored, she was orchestrated, like a symphony of parental pride, drama, and curated perfection. Martin and Yvonne, my in-laws, clung to her every whim like it was divine instruction. She didn't walk into rooms rearranged themselves around her. Clara could destroy a friendship at brunch and still have people thank her for the clarity by dessert. That's the kind of charm she wielded. When she got engaged to Damon, a man with a good jawline, empty ambition, and a love for shirtless selfies, Tessa came to me smiling. Not nervous, not uncertain, just smiling like we both already knew what was coming. We just need help with a few wedding costs, she said. I remember her tone so clearly. Soft, reasonable, familiar. Like we were just splitting a dinner bill, not underwriting an entire event. I didn't flinch. I didn't question. I loved her. And when you love someone, you sign on for their storms. Or at least that's what I believed in. So I said yes. Not blindly, not naively, but intentionally. Because I thought family meant stepping up. I thought partnership was about support, about taking pressure off the person you love. I didn't realize I was being inducted into a lifelong subscription to someone else's spotlight. Tessa's few costs turned into a full-blown budget proposal. It started with the venue. Some vineyard just outside the city that Clara had seen on a bridal influencer's reel. They're usually booked for years, she told me, eyes wide. But I got us in with a connection. The deposit alone was more than our first car. Then came the caterer, who imported truffle oil from Italy. The LED-lit flower wall, custom-made to spell out, Forever Clara and Damon. A live harpist for the cocktail hour. A photo booth designed to resemble an antique dressing room. Each time the requests came in, I adjusted our finances like I was tuning an instrument. I moved savings around. I reallocated bonuses. I even postponed a planned expansion of my company's back-end to accommodate a rush payment for the linens Clara swore were the only shade of ivory that wouldn't wash her out. And I did it all because I told myself I was doing it for family. I was buying goodwill. I was investing in being seen, accepted, integrated. But something shifted early on. Subtle at first. Like a whisper you catch but pretend not to hear. I started noticing how my name was always missing from the excited recaps Clara gave at dinner. Tessa and I locked in the photographer, she'd say, even though I was the one who vetted them, negotiated the rate, and paid the deposit. We just loved the cake options, she'd beam, even though I'd sent the shortlist and covered the tasting cost. I was a silent partner in a show that never acknowledged the stage crew. Tessa noticed it too. I'd catch the flicker in her eyes, the slight clench in her jaw when Clara brushed past me with a thankless smile. But she never spoke up. Not really. She was too used to playing second violin to Clara's first. Still, I kept going. I told myself it was just stress. That Clara would come around. That gratitude, like interest, just needed time to mature. But with every new invoice, with every enthusiastic ask masked as a compliment, "You're so good with numbers. You're just amazing at organizing," I felt myself being converted from brother-in-law to service provider. And I still remember the night I first questioned it all. We were at Clara's engagement party, a Gatsby-themed rooftop event with a literal champagne tower and live jazz band. I'd paid for 70% of it. I stood by the bar, watching Tessa in a sequin dress laugh along with her parents while Clara and Damon held court under a golden arch. A distant cousin I barely knew leaned over and said, "You must be one of the vendors, right? You look too calm to be family." I smiled. Because what else was there to do? I nodded and said, "Yeah, something like that." That night, I lay in bed with Tessa and stared at the ceiling. "You think Clara's happy?" I asked. She turned to me, her voice already half asleep. "She's always happy when people do what she wants." I wanted to laugh, but the truth in that statement sat too heavily on my chest. I didn't say anything else, just turned the lights off and closed my eyes. But I didn't sleep. Not really, because in that moment, I realized I hadn't married into a family. I'd married into a fairy tale, and I was the bank. By the third week of Clara's engagement, I had already become the unofficial financial architect of their wedding fantasy. Nobody asked if I had time. Nobody offered to chip in. The assumption was silent and all-consuming. I was the guy who made things happen. Damon's family, self-proclaimed free spirits, didn't believe in budgets, only manifesting abundance, whatever that meant. Clara called them eccentric. I called them liabilities. It wasn't personal at first. It was math. Simple, brutal math. When I realized Damon's entire contribution to the wedding was an expired gift card and a playlist on Spotify, I stepped in. "You're so good with numbers." Clara had cooed the first time she handed me a receipt for a $1,200 cake tasting. Tessa chimed in from behind her with a nervous smile. "You actually enjoy spreadsheets, don't you?" And there it was, the twist. My professional skill turned into a personal obligation, packaged as a compliment. So I nodded, because what else do you do when everyone is already passing you the baton? That weekend, I sat at our kitchen table with my laptop and 3 mugs of cold coffee, building them a full financial roadmap. Pre-wedding costs, ceremony breakdown, reception logistics, post-event gratuities, honeymoon allocations. I color-coded the columns, estimated vendor delays, built a flexible buffer for emergencies. It was flawless. A masterpiece of planning. Tessa called it adorable. Clara never looked at it. She just said, "Cool, thanks," and went back to sending Pinterest links of floral chandeliers and mirror-top tables. Damon dropped in during one of my update calls, took a sip of my drink without asking, and said, "This is why you're the MVP, man." Then he walked out before I could even ask if he'd followed up with the groomsmen. But I kept at it. Every week, I updated the numbers, adjusted timelines, coordinated with vendors, sent polite but firm emails. They wanted fireworks at the reception? I found a certified pyrotechnic vendor and got the insurance documents signed. They wanted a gold-accented custom dance floor? I tracked one down in the next state and negotiated the delivery. I was a planner, a fixer, a spreadsheet prince with a crown made of conditional gratitude. The joke started not long after. Harmless at first. Tessa's cousin Marla, at one of the Sunday planning sessions, lifted her mimosa and said, "We should print your face on the back of the programs. You're doing everything." Everyone laughed. Even me. Then came the dinner with Clara's college friends, where she said, "This is my brother-in-law. He's funding the fun." I smiled. Tessa squeezed my hand under the table, but something in me had already started to shift. Not all at once. Just a slow disintegration of meaning. I began to wonder if they saw me as anything beyond a calculator with facial recognition. One night, after finalizing a payment schedule for the lighting team, I overheard Clara on speakerphone in the living room. Tessa was on the couch beside me scrolling. Clara's voice echoed, "Honestly, I don't even think he minds. He loves this stuff. I mean, come on, he made a whole timeline for my Flower Girls entrance." Tessa didn't respond, just kept scrolling. I stared at the carpet, willing myself to believe it wasn't meant as a jab, but it sat in me like a rock in the gut. What no one seemed to understand was that I didn't mind helping. I minded being erased while helping. I minded being reduced to a line item. I minded that the more I gave, the less I seemed to exist. Tessa had stopped asking me how work was going. Clara never thanked me with any real weight. Damon once asked if I'd hook him up with a gaming laptop discount, as if I ran an electronics shop, not a software consultancy. Still, I pressed on. I believed in follow-through, in finishing what I started. Even if they didn't see me, I saw the structure holding everything up. And it mattered to me that it didn't collapse. But eventually, even a well-oiled system reaches its limit. For me, that moment came at the floral design preview. Clara had asked for a walkthrough of her bouquet arrangements. Tessa asked if I wanted to tag along since I'd covered the deposit. I agreed, thinking maybe I'd finally get to be included in something sentimental. I wore a button-down, put on cologne. I arrived early, waited. When they walked in, Clara glanced at me and blinked like I was a misplaced coat rack. "Oh," she said, "you didn't have to come. Tessa and I got it handled." No smile, no welcome, just a dismissal, like I was some overeager intern who crashed a meeting. Tessa gave me a quiet, apologetic shrug. I stayed silent through the entire session, offering no feedback. Clara didn't notice. She was too busy posing with the sample bouquet, checking her angles in the mirror. I left before they finished and drove home in silence. That night, I opened the spreadsheet again. I stared at the tabs, the perfect columns, the task tracker with every checkbox marked. Then I opened a new sheet. Blank. Just white squares. Empty boxes. I wrote one word in the top cell. Why? Why was I doing this? Why was I financing joy I wasn't allowed to share? Why was I showing up when my presence was treated like an oversight? I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But I knew the questions weren't going away. The next morning, Damon sent a group message to the planning thread. "Yo, what's the deal with valet parking at the reception? Can we bump that up to full service?" Clara chimed in with a heart emoji. Tessa added a thumbs up. No one tagged me. No one asked if I'd already locked in the contract. I closed the app. For the first time since this whole thing began, I didn't respond. I arrived at the cake tasting with a printed checklist, a copy of the updated guest headcount, and an invoice folder tucked under my arm. It was a warm Saturday afternoon, and I'd rearranged a meeting with a new client just to be there. The venue was 25 miles out of the city, an upscale bakery with chandeliers and cream-colored walls that probably charge per breath. I pulled into the lot, found a space near the rear entrance, and took a breath, trying to convince myself that I was walking into something meaningful, something family. When I walked in, Clara was already seated at the corner table in the front tasting room. Tessa sat beside her, laughing at something on her phone. Two servers were arranging mini samples of cake slices on white porcelain plates, each one delicately topped with a small silver fork. Clara looked up just as I approached, and her expression shifted, not to surprise, not even irritation, just that particular brand of polite discomfort people reserve for someone who wasn't supposed to show up but did anyway. "Oh," she said, lifting her phone off the table like it was more important than my presence. "You didn't have to come. Didn't have to come." Like I hadn't been the one coordinating this vendor for 6 weeks. Like I hadn't been the one to front the deposit after the last tasting fell through because Damon forgot to RSVP. I glanced at Tessa, hoping for a flicker of defense, some gesture that my time and effort were at least acknowledged. But she just smiled softly, like a parent trying not to embarrass a child in front of company. I figured I could help take notes, I said, setting the folder down. "Make sure the flavors and quantities line up with the revised guest count." Clara didn't look up. "We've got it handled." I sat down anyway, on the end of the bench, and watched as the servers brought out sample after sample. Almond poppy seed with vanilla bean frosting, chocolate ganache with raspberry filling, champagne citrus sponge with edible gold flakes. Clara made a face at the last one and waved it off. "Too subtle. I want something that says opulence, not brunch." Damon wasn't there. He rarely was. "He's got band rehearsal," Clara said when I asked. I didn't even know he played an instrument. The conversation turned to centerpieces, then linen textures, then the bridesmaids' shoe colors. I offered a suggestion. Ivory matte would reflect better under lighting than high-gloss satin, and Clara blinked like a robot buffering. "I think we'll go with what feels right," she said. "But thanks." I nodded, swallowed the lump that always seemed to rise during these moments. I was used to being overlooked in this group, but it still hit differently when you were the one footing the bill. There was a kind of dull ache that came with being necessary, but never welcome. Like furniture that everyone uses, but never cleans. After the tasting, they took a few photos. Not of the cakes. Of themselves. Tessa held up her phone, angling it just right while Clara leaned in with a practiced tilt of her chin and the kind of smile that screamed curated happiness. I stood to the side, holding the invoice folder like a fool, waiting for someone to acknowledge me. They didn't. And when Clara posted the photo to her story later that day, the caption read, "Sisters getting it done ring #bride prep #blessed, no mention of me." Not even a tag. I drove home in silence, a familiar pressure building behind my ribs. Not anger. Not quite sadness either. More like the hollow ring of something that had finally clicked into place. A recognition. I wasn't part of this memory. I wasn't meant to be. I was the guy who made it all possible from the shadows, who handed over checks and arranged logistics and made the bride look like a goddess while becoming invisible in the process. That night, I got an email from the stationer with the first draft of the program. I downloaded the PDF and scrolled through it, my eyes scanning every name, every title, every little line of gratitude printed in expensive script. Under special thanks, I saw Tessa's Uncle Mark. He once lent them a punch bowl for a barbecue. I saw Clara's old roommate. I even saw the name of the nail tech who did the trial manicure. But I wasn't there. Nowhere. My name wasn't in the thanks. Not under planning support. Not even as vendor contact. I was listed once, on the final page, under vendor support, alongside the email address for the dry cleaner handling suit alterations. I closed the document. Shut the laptop. Just stared at the dark screen. I thought about everything I'd done. The 15-hour days balancing work and Clara's chaos. The nights I'd skipped rest to run payment audits. The calls I made to ensure they didn't get overcharged on chair rentals. And for what? To be mistaken for a staff member? To be erased from the memory before the memory even happened? Tessa came into the room a little while later, phone in hand, smiling at something. She stopped when she saw my face. "What's wrong?" I turned to her slowly. "Did you see the program?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah. It's just a draft. I'm not in it." She shifted her weight. "You're under vendor support." I laughed once, quiet and low. "I paid for the wedding, Tessa." She sighed, like she was tired of having to explain something obvious. "It's Clara's day." She didn't want to make it about who paid for what. Easy to say when you're not the one paying. Her eyes narrowed. "Why are you making this about you?" That was the moment. The exact second I felt something tear clean down the center of my chest, not out of rage, but out of the sharp, unmistakable realization that I had been married to someone who stopped seeing me a long time ago. Maybe she never fully did. Maybe I was always a role to her, a provider, a background player, the spreadsheet prince with his calculator crown. I stood up, walked past her, didn't say another word. I just went to my office, opened my drawer, and pulled out the full vendor contract file. And I started reading cancellation clauses. It wasn't even the post. It was the laugh behind it, the echo of joy I hadn't heard in my own home in weeks. I was sitting at my desk finishing a project sprint when the alert popped up. At Clarabelle_Hart posted a new story. I almost didn't click. Lately, I'd stopped checking Clara's updates because they were always drenched in the kind of overproduced fairy tale energy that made my skin crawl. But curiosity is a slow, stupid thing. I clicked. The first clip was shaky footage of a champagne bottle popping open in a sunlit room. Then came squeals, Tessa's among them, unmistakable. Next, a group shot, Clara, Tessa, and 4 other women in matching white robes embroidered with their names, sitting around a spa tub with floating rose petals. #SpoilTheBride, #SisterGoals flashed in pastel cursive over the screen. I watched the full 20-second video with the stillness of a man watching his house being burgled in real time, except in this case, the thief was joy, and it had taken everything I thought was ours and packed it into an event I hadn't even been told about. There was no mention of it before. Not a whisper. Not a "hey, I'm heading out tomorrow with Clara." Nothing. Tessa had left that morning in yoga pants and a loose sweater, said she might stop by her parents' house. And now, here she was, sipping mimosas under eucalyptus steam while I was back home fielding late-night vendor questions and rerouting floral shipments because someone decided they wanted peonies instead of orchids. Again, I didn't react right away. I watched it twice, maybe 3 times. Not because I needed clarification, but because part of me wanted to confirm the absence. I wasn't mentioned. Not in the captions. Not in the comments. Just invisible, again. My wife and her sister were off living the curated dream, and I was the shadow keeping the lights on. When Tessa came home that night, I didn't say a word. I just watched her float through the door, smelling of lavender oil and fresh toner, cheeks flushed like she'd just had the perfect day. She kissed me on the forehead in that distracted way someone might pat a dog they've forgotten they own. Then she walked straight into the bedroom to lie down, leaving me in the kitchen with the quiet, and a reheated bowl of pasta. An hour later, I finally broke the silence. How was your parents' place? She didn't even blink. Fine. We didn't stay long. I stared at her. That spa story looked longer than a quick visit. She paused, just for a second, then shrugged. It was just a girl's thing. Clara wanted a stress relief day. You wouldn't have enjoyed it. That was when it split. Not a crack. A rupture. A vein bursting open in my chest, right where hope used to live. It wasn't about the spa. It wasn't even about the money. I'd paid for the spa retreat, after all. I recognized the name of the resort from the reservation invoice I'd booked under my account last month. No, it was about the unspoken message baked into every layer of that day. I wasn't part of it. I wasn't considered. I wasn't thought of as family. I was a financier. A breathing, walking funding stream. I paid for that day, I said, voice calm but tight. Tessa looked at me like I was being petty. So you didn't tell me. You didn't even think to tell me. She sighed. Because you would have made it about the money. I laughed. Not bitter. Just broken. I didn't have to. You did. She turned over on the bed, her back to me, and muttered, "You're being dramatic." And in that moment, I knew something that changed everything. I knew I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't being sensitive. I was finally seeing clearly. The role I played wasn't husband or partner or even brother-in-law. It was investor. Silent. Supportive. Disposable. I had poured myself into Clara's wedding like it meant something, like it bought me a seat at the table, and instead, they used my hands to build their empire while pushing me out of the photo frame. I went back to my office and sat there for a long time in the dark. I opened my email and reread the thread with the spa's concierge. I saw the reservation I had made, the payment I had authorized. All of it traced back to me. But they didn't see that. They didn't care. Because people like Clara, and maybe even people like Tessa, don't thank the floor beneath them. They walk on it. They cover it with rugs and call it theirs. I thought about the moments I had justified all of this. The little compromises. The small humiliations. The jokes at my expense. He's the numbers guy. He's just so good at being invisible when needed. I laughed when they laughed. Smiled when they sighed. All because I thought love required sacrifice. But what no one tells you is that when sacrifice becomes expectation, it stops being noble. It becomes servitude. I turned my monitor back on. Pulled up the main wedding file. The contracts. The schedule. The vendor list. I scrolled down to a folder I'd labeled discretionary ads, things Clara wanted but didn't consider essential. Custom napkin embossers. Luxury hand lotion in every guest bathroom. The vintage champagne flutes she insisted matched her vision. They were all paid for. Quietly. By me. I hovered over the folder. Then moved my cursor to the delete key. I didn't press it. Not yet. I wasn't angry enough for that. But I was something close. Tired. Clear. I realized that there was no fixing this with a heart-to-heart or a dinner talk. This wasn't miscommunication. It was recognition. I had seen the truth behind the glitter and hashtags. And now, I was counting receipts. Not because I wanted revenge, but because for the first time since this all began, I understood what I was worth. And I wasn't giving discounts anymore. The rehearsal dinner was held at a private loft in downtown Charleston. The kind of place that looked like it belonged in an overpriced coffee table book, exposed brick walls, Edison bulb chandeliers, and enough reclaimed wood to rebuild an ark. I arrived exactly on time, wearing a navy blazer and polished shoes, the ones Tessa once said made me look too corporate, which, coming from her, was half compliment, half complaint. I walked in carrying the finalized seating chart I had printed at my own expense because the wedding planner Clara hired, then fired, had left behind a mess. But of course, when I arrived, the table was already set. My seating chart wasn't on it. I looked around and saw Clara at the center of the room in a white cocktail dress, her hair styled in those effortlessly glamorous waves that take 3 hours and a dedicated stylist. Damon stood beside her in a shirt that was trying way too hard to look casual. Guests buzzed around them, champagne flutes in hand. I scanned the crowd for Tessa and found her across the room, talking to her mother. When she saw me, she didn't wave. Just gave me that familiar tight-lipped smile that meant, be cool. Clara spotted me a moment later. Her expression didn't change, but she stepped forward, heels clicking lightly on the hardwood floor, and gestured toward the group behind her. Hey everyone, she said, loud enough to quiet the nearby chatter. This is my sister's husband. He works with computers or something. They laughed. Polite chuckles from people who didn't know me, didn't care to, and now had a perfectly forgettable description to latch onto. I stood there, smile fixed in place, pretending I hadn't just been condensed into a punchline by someone I had indirectly bankrolled for the last 9 months. I nodded, offered a restrained wave, and moved toward the corner of the room, trying to blend into the scenery like I always seem to do at these events. A waiter passed by with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. I took one, ate it slowly, thought about how I could be anywhere else in the world, how I should be anywhere else. The toast began around 30 minutes later. Clara's father stood first, raising his glass and calling her our incandescent star. Her mother followed, quoting poetry and crying on cue. Then the best man, a frat brother of Damon's, got up and launched into a long-winded tribute that somehow became less about Damon and more about the real friends who showed up. That line was met with laughter and claps. Tessa turned to me and muttered, "Don't overthink it. It's not your day." I nodded, but I didn't speak. I didn't trust my voice to be steady. I watched Damon slap his best man on the back, grinning like he'd just won a bet. Clara dabbed her eyes dramatically with a napkin, then pulled Tessa in for a side hug while someone took a photo. I wasn't in it, of course. I was standing too far to the side, exactly where they liked me. After the speeches, people began mingling again, the room humming with laughter and clinking glasses. I found myself back near the bar, nursing a half glass of wine I didn't even want, when Tessa came over. "You okay?" she asked. "Fine," I said. She tilted her head. "You've been quiet. Wouldn't want to ruin the vibe," I replied, my tone too flat to sound like a joke. She exhaled, looked away for a moment, then leaned in and said, "It's just a rehearsal dinner. You don't have to make it about you." I stared at her. Clara introduced me like I was the IT guy who wandered in. She was joking. No, she wasn't. And you know it. Tessa's lips parted like she was about to argue, but then her phone buzzed. She glanced down and smiled. "Clara wants a quick group shot. I'll be right back." I watched her walk away, sliding seamlessly into the huddle of smiling faces, her arm around Clara's waist as the photographer snapped away. Damon threw up 2 fingers in a peace sign. Clara laughed, tossing her head back like joy came easy to her and always would. I turned back toward the wall and took another sip of the wine, letting it burn a little. Later that night, back at home, I walked into our bedroom to find Tessa sitting up in bed, her face lit by her phone screen. She was laughing softly, scrolling through something. I tossed my jacket onto the chair, loosened my tie, and headed toward the bathroom when I heard it. Another laugh. Sharper. Louder. She tapped her phone and grinned. "What's so funny?" I asked, pausing by the door. "Nothing," she said quickly. "Just a dumb message." I didn't say anything, just raised an eyebrow. She hesitated, then turned the screen toward me. "It's just Clara and Marla being idiots." On the screen was a group chat thread. Clara had posted a message that read, "At least we don't have to Photoshop him out of the photos if he's not coming LOL." Underneath, a string of laughing emojis. Marla had replied, "Silver linings face with tears of joy." I didn't speak. I just stared at it. Tessa's smile faded. "They're just joking. Don't take it so personally." I turned, walked over to the dresser, and opened the top drawer. Pulled out my laptop. Sat down at the edge of the bed and opened the contracts folder. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Reading," I said. "Tessa, do you know how many of these people thanked me tonight?" I said, keeping my eyes on the screen. "Do you know how many times I was even referred to by name?" She was silent. "I've been bankrolling this wedding like it's my legacy project. Like it's some contribution to a family I keep being reminded I was never really a part of." "Babe, I read that message. And you laughed." "I didn't mean to." "You laughed." She looked down. "It's not that deep." I closed the laptop gently, stood up, and looked at her. "No, it's exactly that deep. It's been that deep for a long time. You just stopped noticing how far down I've sunk." She didn't respond, didn't move, just sat there with the phone still glowing in her lap. I left the room, walked back to my office, and sat in the dark. That night, something inside me changed. Not a flash of fury, not a collapse, a reconfiguration. I wasn't going to be their punchline anymore. I was going to be their wake-up call. The message came through at 9:42 a.m. on a Thursday. I was in the middle of reviewing a build for a legacy system upgrade when my phone buzzed twice in succession. Tessa's name lit up the screen. I expected it to be a question about dinner, or maybe something petty from Clara relayed through her like always. But what I read drained the heat from my chest. You're not invited. Clara doesn't want you there. 12 words. No greeting. No punctuation. No warmth. Just a verdict. A judgment without trial. I blinked at it, read it again and again, like maybe there was a missing line, some context left out. But there wasn't. That was it. That was all. I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then I locked it and just sat there, frozen in the quiet hum of my office, cursor blinking on a paused email, the sentence I'd been drafting now irrelevant. My eyes drifted to the folder on the corner of my desk, Clara plus Damon wedding assets. Inside that folder were documents, contracts, signed receipts, custom design orders, seating charts, contingency schedules, hours of unpaid labor, tens of thousands of dollars. All quietly organized by me while Clara smiled for Instagram and Tessa kept pretending I wasn't being erased in real time. I reopened the phone. No follow-up message. No, I'm sorry this is happening. No, can we talk? Just a single, clean slice of dismissal. As if I was an old coat left behind in a guest room. Too out of place for the picture, too familiar to actually notice. The bile rose in my throat, not with rage, but with the cool understanding of exactly what I was to them. Not family, not even a person, just a placeholder, just funding. I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I opened the folder. The master file had 55 subfolders. DJ contracts, event layout blueprints, digital mock-ups for welcome signs, high-resolution logos, Clara's seating app credentials, the full registry integration codes, all of it touched by me, coordinated by me, paid for by me. I hovered over the root folder, and for a moment, I said it aloud, like a ritual, then pay for it yourselves. Click. Delete. There was a second of hesitation, the kind of stillness that settles right before you jump into something irreversible. But it passed quickly. The loading bar slid across the screen. Gone. Then I went to work. I opened the venue contract first. Sent an email to the coordinator. Please be advised, the primary contact and funding source for the Hartwell-Grayson wedding is terminating financial responsibility effective immediately. Kindly remove my card from file and cancel any pending services associated with my name. I'll absorb the termination fees. I wasn't bluffing. I'd planned for this moment quietly over the past 2 weeks, once the rehearsal dinner confirmed every unspoken truth I had suspected. The joke messages. The missing name on the program. The way Tessa had begun treating me like a live-in consultant instead of a husband. All of it had led me here. Next came the DJ, an overpriced duo from Miami who'd insisted on pre-selecting all the dance transitions. I canceled the deposit and flagged the auto-renewal on the remainder. Their assistant sent a shocked emoji reply. I didn't answer. The chef, the string quartet, the shuttle bus vendor. One by one, I sent termination notices. Some required call-ins, some cancellations via private portals. I had access to everything. I had built the infrastructure, after all. They'd just worn it like a crown and assumed it would hold. By noon, I'd unraveled over 70% of their wedding. Cleanly, quietly, legally. Then I sent my reply. Understood. Then pay for it yourselves. 3 minutes later, Tessa called. I didn't answer. 10 minutes after that, Clara called, 6 times. By the 7th, she left a voicemail. Her voice was high-pitched, frantic, stuffed with false tears. You're ruining my life. What the hell is wrong with you? This is petty. This is cruel. No mention of the money. No mention of the months of work I'd put in. Just outrage that the convenience of me had disappeared. I listened once, then deleted it. At 1:03 p.m., Tessa sent a wall of text in all caps. You can't cancel the wedding. Everything is set. This isn't just about you. You're embarrassing me. What will people think? I stared at it, unimpressed. Finally, I typed back. You already embarrassed me. You just assumed I'd pay for it too. Silence. At 2:20, Tessa's father emailed. Long-winded guilt. Something about family duty. About appearances. About how these things affect reputation. We're all upset, he wrote. But let's be adults and move forward for Clara's sake. Clara's sake. It had always been for Clara's sake. I ignored the email. By 4 p.m., the country club sent a formal cancellation confirmation. The date was released. Their account was closed. Clara's name was removed from the registry integration page. Her wedding website, the one I built through my developer account, went offline with one click. I didn't even bother with a warning. Let them wonder. Let them scramble. That night, I poured myself a drink. Something I rarely did. I sat on the balcony, the city lights reflecting off my glass. And for the first time in months, I felt still. I felt real. I had drawn a boundary and held it. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't begged. I hadn't tried to be seen by people committed to looking past me. I'd simply withdrawn the very thing they depended on, my quiet, compliant presence. I wasn't angry. I was done. Let Clara cry. Let Damon's cousins DJ with a Bluetooth speaker. Let Tessa try to reassemble what she helped tear apart. I had already built their castle. Now I was walking away from the ruins. And the echo behind me was theirs to explain. The fallout didn't take long. By the time the sun began its slow descent behind the city skyline, my phone had already turned into a hand grenade. It vibrated across the table so hard it nearly knocked over my glass. Missed calls, texts, emails, DMs. The first call came from Clara 13 times in a row. Each time, I declined it. By the 14th, she finally left a voicemail, her voice trembling with barely concealed rage. You can't do this. You don't understand what you've done. I have guests flying in. I have fittings. I have commitments. You're not just ruining my wedding. You're ruining my life. Her voice cracked on the word life, like this moment was some cinematic third-act climax she'd scripted in her head. Maybe it was. Maybe to her, the world really did revolve around peony arrangements and filtered story posts. But to me, it was just another example of how deep the entitlement ran. I played the voicemail once, deleted it, then took a deep breath and finished the last of my emails. There were only 2 vendors left to contact at that point. The calligrapher who was finishing the table cards and the valet company that was scheduled to manage traffic flow at the vineyard. Both had been paid in advance. Both had been unusually pleasant to deal with. So I sent polite, concise messages. Hi, I'm terminating services for the Hartwell Grayson event scheduled for this Saturday. Please halt production and refund any remaining balance not already rendered. Thank you for your professionalism. Done. At 5:47 p.m., Tessa finally called. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. Then I picked up, not because I wanted to hear what she had to say, but because I wanted her to hear my silence in real time. Are you proud of yourself? She said the moment I answered. Are you actually sitting there smiling while everything crashes down? I didn't reply. She kept going. You've humiliated me. You've made Clara look like a fool. Everyone's freaking out. We were 2 days out. 2 days. What kind of man does this? A man who was never invited, I said. She paused, caught off guard. What? That was your message, wasn't it? I continued, calm. You're not invited. Clara doesn't want you there. No explanation. No discussion. Just exile. Like I was some intern who asked to speak at the company retreat. It wasn't personal. You're right, I said. It wasn't. It was business. So I handled it like business. You're unbelievable. I was. For months. I gave and gave and gave. Quietly. Respectfully. Hoping that maybe, just maybe, it would earn me a seat at a table I already paid for. But instead, you all got comfortable with my silence. You mistook it for consent. We were stressed. No. You were ungrateful. Click. I ended the call before she could twist it further. I didn't need more guilt. I didn't need another performance. I needed peace. That night, I left my apartment and drove to the edge of the city. Parked by the water. Just me, the wind, and the distant hum of a world that wasn't falling apart at my expense. I watched the reflections on the surface shimmer under the moonlight and let the quiet fill me like medicine. Meanwhile, back in their world, everything was imploding. The venue coordinator forwarded me an email from Clara sent shortly after my termination notice. It was a desperate plea laced with entitlement. Please disregard his cancellation. He doesn't speak for us. We're still moving forward with everything. The response from the venue was perfect. Short, corporate, unbothered. We cannot honor the event without financial assurance from the primary payer on file. As that individual has revoked authorization and dissolved the account, the booking has been canceled. I smiled. Then came the floral vendor. They kept 20% as a non-refundable fee. One Clara had insisted I prepay early because she wanted first dibs on rare pastel anemones. The email they sent her was blunt. We regret the circumstances, but cannot recoup your date this late in the season. Please understand our policies are industry standard. The DJ service responded next. They informed Clara that the equipment was already rerouted and their team would not be flying in. Clara tried offering a new payment method. They declined, not because of the money, but because of the disrespect. I told them the truth in my cancellation email. I was being used. And apparently, that stuck. By noon the next day, Tessa's parents had sent me a long-winded message. It read like a letter written by two people who had never been told no in their lives. While we respect your hurt feelings, we believe your actions were disproportionate and detrimental to the family reputation. This wedding was about joy, about unity, not punishment. It is our sincerest hope you will reconsider your decision in the name of grace. I didn't respond. Instead, I called the bank and froze the joint credit card that Clara had somehow gotten her hands on when Tessa, accidentally, gave her the number. I flagged every charge related to the wedding as unauthorized. The rep on the phone, a soft-voiced woman named Michelle, paused after hearing my explanation. "Sir," she said, "just so I'm clear. You funded an event for people who then disinvited you." "Yes." She exhaled. "Well." Then she added, "Don't worry. We'll handle it." By that evening, Clara's Instagram story had vanished. The countdown clock was gone. The bridal prep selfies were replaced with a single black screen and white text. "Sometimes people you trust the most are the ones who tear everything down." The comments were brutal. Some supportive. Others asking what happened. A few tagging Damon. I didn't watch for long. I didn't care for the drama. I didn't want revenge. I wanted resolution. Tessa tried again that night. I let the call ring out. She followed up with a text. "It didn't have to be this way." I sent back 3 words. "You chose silence." Because that's what it always came down to. Not just Clara's behavior, but Tessa's permission of it. Her quiet nods. Her shrugs. Her smirks when I was left out of photos, out of stories, out of gratitude. She thought I'd just keep swallowing it. Keep solving everything like a good background husband. But I wasn't their silent investor anymore. I was done underwriting a fantasy where my presence didn't matter. I logged into the wedding website one last time. The splash page still had Clara and Damon's names floating above a rose gold banner with a date that no longer existed. I clicked the admin panel. Found the delete site option. Clicked. A prompt appeared. "Are you sure you want to permanently delete this wedding site and all its contents?" "Yes." Done. That night, I slept deeply. No noise. No interruptions. Just clean, calm air. Clara could cry. Tessa could explain. Yvonne and Martin could host a dinner party to salvage their image. It was all out of my hands. And for the first time in months, that felt like freedom. Let them freak out. Let the vendors go silent. Let the bills go unpaid. They'd spent so long pretending I didn't exist. Now they would have to figure out how to do everything. Without me, I left that night without saying a word. No notes. No drawn-out fights. No theatrical exits. Just the keys on the kitchen counter and the silence of a man who had nothing left to explain. My bag had already been packed for a week, just in case. A few changes of clothes, my laptop, some cash. The essentials. I walked out of the apartment we used to call home and didn't look back. Didn't even check if the lights were off. For once, I didn't care if something was left behind. Let it all rot in that curated shell of a marriage. Tessa could tell whatever story she wanted when she walked in and found the air cleared of my presence. Maybe she'd say I was petty, or vindictive, or cruel, but she wouldn't say I was surprised. Because she knew. Somewhere deep down, behind all the smirks and justifications, she knew I'd reached the edge. I drove until the city lights thinned into black stretches of nothing, until the traffic faded behind me and only the hum of the tires on the road remained. Hours passed before I stopped. I didn't pick a place. I let the coast find me. Pulled into a small roadside and near the ocean, paid in cash, didn't give a name. The woman at the front desk handed me a key without asking questions. My room faced the water. When I stepped inside, the salt air rolled in through a cracked window like a forgotten promise. I kicked off my shoes, collapsed on the bed, and listened. No texts. No calls. Just me and the sea. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. Walked barefoot down to the shoreline with a cup of black coffee and stood there in the early blue haze, watching the waves roll in and out like breath. It was the first time I had felt still in months. No demands. No spreadsheets. No one asking me to just handle it, while simultaneously cutting me out of the picture. I was nobody out here. No titles. No roles. No expectations. And in that anonymity, I found something I didn't know I'd been missing. Peace. I stayed on that stretch of coast for 3 days. No phone. No Wi-Fi. I turned everything off. Disconnected from the digital leash that had kept me tethered to people who only reached out when they wanted something. I let the world spin without me for a while. And to my surprise, it did just fine. The sun still rose. The waves still came in. I wasn't missed. Not really. Not by them. On the third day, I finally turned on my phone. It lit up with chaos. 72 missed calls. Dozens of voicemails. A barrage of text messages. Tessa's first message was 5 paragraphs long. It started with "You really hurt me," transitioned into "You blindsided everyone," and ended with "But you're not beyond redemption." Clara's texts were more dramatic, less coherent. All caps screaming, followed by attempted guilt. "You've ruined the happiest day of my life. And I hope you feel like a man now." Damon texted once. Just a middle finger emoji. I smiled at that one. He always did have a way with words. Then there were the mutual friends. People who had been at our wedding, who had toasted to our love, now messaging me with faux concern. "Hey, just checking in. Tessa's really upset. Maybe you should talk to her." As if I hadn't spent the last year screaming silently through my actions, begging for acknowledgement that never came. No, there was nothing to talk about. Nothing left in the vault. I wasn't looking to repair the bridge. I'd burned it, salted the earth, watched the smoke rise, and finally, breathed. I sent one message that day. Just one. To Tessa. "I'm safe. I'm done. I'm not coming back." I didn't wait for her reply. I didn't need to. The power of closure isn't in the conversation, it's in the decision. I had been a checkbook to her family, a convenient fixture, an ever-reliable source of support who never asked for credit, who never raised his voice, who disappeared when they needed him to be invisible. But the moment I withdrew that support, the illusion shattered. And what was left? Panic, blame, desperation. I wasn't coming back to that. Not again. Not ever. I spent the rest of that week rebuilding myself in small ways. Morning walks, quiet meals, reading paperbacks I'd never had time for. I deleted the wedding spreadsheet from my cloud drive. I cleaned out the vendor contacts from my phone. I unsubscribed from Clara's wedding registry updates. Bit by bit, I erased the architecture of a world that had been built on my time, my money, and my silence. On the 5th day, I got an email from the photographer. He was one of the few people I'd liked. Professional, detail-oriented, honest. He'd done the engagement shoot and the pre-wedding candids, all of which I'd coordinated and paid for. The email was simple. "Hi. Clara has stopped replying to messages. Payment for the remaining photo packages is still pending. Can you confirm who is responsible going forward?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I replied, "Clara Hartwell. She'll understand. No further detail. No lecture. Just a redirection. Let her clean up the glitter. Let her understand what it meant to have real responsibility, not just curated optics." The world she crafted didn't come with auto-renew. It ran on someone's labor, someone's money, mine. And now she'd have to find a new engine. Word eventually got out. I didn't post anything, didn't make announcements. But people started talking, whispering, wondering why the wedding was canceled, why Clara's Instagram had gone dark, why Tessa's ring finger was missing from her latest photos. They speculated. Invented drama. Some asked me directly, and I gave them nothing. Not because I was protecting anyone, but because the truth wasn't mine to shout, it was theirs to choke on. From a distance, I watched the facade collapse. Clara and Damon still got married, eventually. I heard through a friend that it was on a public beach with rented chairs and a Bluetooth speaker. Tessa stood awkwardly in the background, no longer the smiling sister of the bride, but a woman haunted by the fallout of choices she once found convenient. They tried to salvage the narrative, posted a caption that read, "Love always wins." But the likes were fewer. The comments, muted. I didn't engage. I didn't need to. While they scrambled to patch together a wedding with duct tape and denial, I rebuilt my life in silence. I moved into a smaller place closer to the water. Restarted my side project full-time, a digital tool I'd been designing for event logistics and personal boundaries. Ironically, the same skills I used to help Clara now served to build a platform that helped others avoid people like her. It was clean, elegant, secure. I called it Boundaries. Because planning should be beautiful, but boundaries? Those are priceless. By the time the app hit 6 figures in revenue, I hadn't heard from Tessa in over 2 months. Our divorce filing was quiet, mutual. She didn't contest anything. I think, deep down, she knew she'd already lost the most valuable asset she had, the one who stayed through every insult, who solved every problem. The man who paid for everything and never once asked to be thanked. Now he was gone. I didn't feel angry anymore. Just light. Like I had finally stepped out from under a weight I didn't realize was pressing down on me. I wasn't the checkbook. I wasn't the background. I wasn't the quiet one holding it all together. I was the man who walked away. And in doing so, I became the one thing they never saw coming, free. It's been 7 months. Enough time for the dust to settle, the silence to harden into clarity, and the pain to reshape into something sharp, deliberate, and useful. The first few weeks after I walked away, I wasn't sure what came next. All I knew was that going back wasn't an option. Not after what they did. Not after how they did it. I used to think closure required some grand confrontation. Words shouted, apologies begged for, maybe even some form of acknowledgement. But real closure is quieter. It's the silence you stop trying to fill. It's the day you wake up and don't think about them first. It's knowing you could explain your side to the world and then choosing not to. Tessa and I are officially divorcing. We filed electronically. I didn't ask for anything. I didn't fight over property. I let her have the apartment, the furniture, even the wedding china that we never used. She moved back in with her parents while waiting for some next chapter to arrive, and I made sure every joint account was closed, every digital fingerprint I had in that household erased. I became a ghost with receipts. I didn't need to scream or slam doors. All I needed was distance and a memory long enough to remember everything they hoped I'd forget. Clara and Damon did get married eventually, though not in the way they'd planned. Not in the mansion on the hill with the vineyard backdrops and the harpists. Not with the designer lighting or the LED flower wall or the imported linens I'd already paid deposits for. No, they stood on a public beach under a drooping arch someone's uncle probably borrowed from a hardware store. The chairs were mismatched. The audio cut in and out. A teenager with an iPhone and a cracked screen handled the music. Clara wore the same dress, though. It wasn't like she'd let a little thing like humiliation stand between her and a photo op. She posted a filtered carousel on Instagram. Still perfect. Still love. Still ours. But the comments weren't the same. There was no swarm of praise. No viral repost. Just silence, scattered with the occasional wait. What happened to the vineyard wedding? And didn't you say this was going to be black tie? The algorithm didn't lie. Even curated illusions crack when the truth gets tired of being quiet. They never paid the vendors back. Not the photographer. Not the lighting tech. Not the floral designer who ate a $9,000 cancellation because Clara refused to answer her calls. I didn't warn them. I figured it wasn't my job to keep shielding people from Clara's incompetence. Let them learn like I did, slowly, painfully, and with an invoice in hand. Meanwhile, I rebuilt. Not just my schedule or my apartment, but my entire identity. I dove headfirst into the software project I'd shelved during the wedding madness. What began as a simple planning tool had evolved into something more meaningful. I called it Boundaries. At first, it was just a personal experiment, an app designed to help people manage event logistics while keeping emotional and financial boundaries intact. But it resonated. Hard. Turns out, I wasn't the only one who'd been used, ghosted, and written out of family photos while funding the whole production. Within 3 months, we had thousands of downloads. Within 6, we were doing 6 figures a quarter. The irony didn't escape me. The same skills I used to hold their fantasy together were now making me money. Real money. Money I wasn't ashamed to earn. Clients came from everywhere. Burned out siblings, scapegoated spouses, best friends who funded bridal showers they were never invited to. I didn't market it as revenge. I didn't have to. People understood. People knew. One night, I got a message from someone I didn't recognize. It was a new vendor, a florist in North Carolina. She just signed up for Boundaries and wrote, "This app saved me from another Clara Hartwell." I read it twice. Then I laughed. A full, honest, chest-deep laugh I hadn't felt in years. That was the real revenge, not in the ruin, but in the rebuild. Not in proving anything to Clara or Tessa or the Hartwells, but in proving to myself that I didn't have to stay where I wasn't seen. I could leave. I did leave. And I didn't crumble. I grew. Every now and then, someone tries to get the full story. An old mutual friend will reach out, ask what really happened. They always start the same way. I heard the wedding was wild, or Clara said you flipped out over something small. And I let them talk. Let them stumble around the edges of gossip. And when they're done, I just say this: she told me I wasn't invited. So I canceled the bill. That's it. No rant. No bitterness. Just facts. The receipt. The bridge they burned, not me. I wasn't cruel. I was clear. And in a world that treats silence like consent, clarity is rebellion. The last time I saw Tessa was at a grocery store, of all places. It had been 5 months since we filed. I was walking out with a basket full of produce and protein bars when I saw her in the parking lot. She looked tired. Not sad, just drained. Her phone was in one hand, a bottle of wine in the other. She glanced up, saw me, and froze. I didn't stop. She didn't wave. We passed each other like strangers who once knew something about the other, but no longer had the language to name it. And that was fine. Some people are meant to fade. Some lessons are meant to leave scars. And some bridges are meant to burn so you never go back. I built a life from the ashes. I wrote my own narrative. And the most satisfying part? I never had to scream. I never had to stoop. All I did was stand up, quietly, firmly, and walk away. Let them plan their fairy tales. Let them toast with their borrowed glasses. Let them tell the story however they need to save face. But me? I've got the receipts. I've got the peace. And this time, the only invitation I'm responding to is my own.